Once again, we're back here on Star Wars Now to talk about the latest chapter of The Mandalorian. Sit tight as we jump into Chapter 12, The Siege, to discuss everything from this fantastic episode of the Season 2 so far. Hey everyone, my name's Captain Jack and welcome back to Star Wars Now. The Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 12, The Siege, has come and gone, and given us a great episode that was almost considered to be a filler episode, was actually rather exciting. Chapter 12 sees the Mandalorian return to the planet of Nevaroo and reunite with his friends Greef Karga and Cara Dune. There they work together to take out an Imperial outpost, and some of this you can see from recent Mandalorian trailers. This episode itself was directed by Carl Weathers, who makes his first directorial debut for The Mandalorian. Of course, it's written by Jon Favreau, so again you can expect a very good episode that is tying in with the last 4 chapters of Season 2. Now, before we jump into our review and breakdown and discussion of this episode, if you are new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from myself and the team here on Star Wars Now. As a warning, we'll be discussing this episode in full, so be warned there's going to be spoilers in it from now on. Turn away if you've not watched Chapter 12, and I really highly recommend you do so, as it's fantastic. Okay, that was your warning, let's jump into it. So Chapter 12, The Siege. Now this chapter sees the Mandalorian return to Nevaroo after he's been away for quite some time now. After him, Greef Karga, Cara Dune, and IG-11 liberated it from Moff Gideon's forces. It's actually at this point we do get to learn that the Mandalorian thought Moff Gideon was dead. Throughout this episode he learns that that's not the case, and he's actually been working on something quite mysterious which we'll discuss in a minute. We do get these great scenes of Greef Karga and Cara Dune meeting the Mandalorian as he decides to land on Nevaroo, where they've decided to turn the entire outpost around. They've also got a school where the old bar cantina used to be, with a droid now teaching kids. The child also gets put in that classroom and steals someone's biscuits, which I thought was hilarious, to be honest. There is this great father-son moment on board the Razor Crest before they land on the planet of the Mandalorian trying to get the child to fix the ship by crossing the wires. I'm seeing a lot of memes online right now, versus what a Mandalorian sees versus what the child sees, and it's just the Among Us wire task, etc., which I found hilarious, to be honest. It's kind of accurate. Have you ever tried to fix something with a kid? It's like working with animals in a way. Just don't do it. Children are animals. Don't do it. Or Baby Yoda's in this case. Not worth your time. Anyway, like I said, this episode was fantastic. Going back to the technicality details, Carl Weathers did a fantastic job in directing this episode. We knew Ahsoka was not going to turn up this episode, simply put because Carl Weathers was directing it, whereas the next chapter, Chapter 13, which we believe is called The Sorcerer, no confirmation just yet, is going to be directed and written by Dave Filoni, who of course created the character of Ahsoka and helped shepherd the story of the Clone Wars. So naturally, he is the person to tell her story and her arrival into live action. So I expect we'll see her coming in the next chapter, so keep an eye out for that. That's definitely the Mandalorian's next port of call in this story so far. But I obviously have to talk about the ending of this episode and sort of the subject and matter in it as a whole. As, the trio decide to actually attack this Imperial outpost, it's revealed this isn't much of a skeleton base, and instead it's a forged science lab of Moff Gideon's Imperial remnant. There we learn that, while they're dicking around and doing several things, Moff Gideon is up to something. At first I thought it was cloning, but when we look more into it, it looks like Moff Gideon is trying to transfuse the Force, or midichlorians in this case, into other hosts, so therefore trying to give it to further people, to further whatever project he's up to. We see 2 scientists who quickly try and delete the data. Now, Dr. Pershing also makes an appearance again via hologram this time. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually appear that much, but he's here once again. Now, the last time we saw Dr. Pershing, it was in Chapter 3 of The Mandalorian, and that was when the Imperial compound was attacked by Din Djarin to rescue the child. Dr. Pershing did actually not harm a child, but it was revealed he did harvest a sample of the child's blood, which obviously contains midichlorians, the thing that give Jedi and Force wielders the Force in a way. It's like the easiest way to explain it. I know the whole midichlorian argument is a long discussion to be had, but we'll talk about that another time. Dr. Pershing's also been working on something, and we've almost seen the tanks here, which I'll show on screen right now. For a minute I thought, oh no, they're cloning Palpatine, oh no, they're cloning Snoke, because it kind of looked like that in a way, and due to the light of the screen, you can't really see who is in there, but it's implied these are subjects who've been, volunteers to basically force the midichlorian process into them. Moff Gideon is definitely up to something, and he's definitely trying to inject the Force into others. Before the ending of this episode, my thought was, Moff Gideon is trying to inject the Force into himself, so therefore he can wield the darksaber better and rule as like a true Imperial leader in a way, because he's going to be a bit like Darth Vader or Palpatine. Not like them in a way, but he'll have a Force and a lightsaber. When on the scales of like Imperial intimidation, that's quite high up there, to be honest, on how most Imperials lead their forces. It's definitely one way to make sure your Imperial remnant is going to follow your orders. But let's quickly talk about, the ending of this. When it closes out, after Mandalorian defeats the TIE Outlanders and, Nevaroo is safe once again, he heads off into space. Yet it's revealed that Moff Gideon does actually have his own fleet. As expected from the get-go when Junior Esposito teased it earlier on this year, Moff Gideon has his own fleet. Particularly, he has an Imperial Arctans-class command cruiser. This is basically an Imperial light cruiser. We've seen these many times throughout Star Wars. Typically, we saw them in Star Wars The Clone Wars when there was an Arctans-class light cruiser. Obi-Wan used one at one point for attacking General Grievous. Now, we do see a lot of them in the Imperial era as well. They're kind of interesting. They do turn up every now and again. Obviously, it is a Republic warship, which was later repurposed for the Imperial era and does make a lot of sense. We see them in Battlefront 2. They're basically a common ship to throw across most of the timeline right now. Now, it appears Moff Gideon has a modified version of this. Why it's modified, we don't know quite yet. You can see several things on it, but yeah, that's kind of about it. You can't see every detail, but I believe at some point it'll be explained why this is a modified version. On board, one of his loyal Imperial officers receives a communication from a spy on Nevaroo, who has planted a tracking device on the Razor Crest, therefore kind of hinting to us that Moff Gideon is now going to confront the Mandalorian. Now, considering Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, is on his way to find Ahsoka Tano, it makes sense that Gideon is going to have a run-in with Ahsoka Tano. Now, considering he wields a darksaber, and believably she still wields her lightsabers at this point, or a lightsaber at least, we're definitely going to see some lightsaber combat, I think, which is going to be interesting. Now, of course, Ahsoka, we know her character. She is one to go to protect a child, but also a child of the Force in a way. Therefore, when Gideon comes knocking, she's probably going to be prepared. But we should probably talk about what Gideon is actually up to on board his ship. Now, in one of the closing scenes, we saw him standing in this, what I thought was his lair for a minute, but no, it's actually some sort of mini laboratory, or cupboard in a way, I guess you could easily explain it. And he is working on something which is even more interesting. We see these dark troopers in the sort of like closets or alcoves here, and it's clear him and his scientists are working on it in a way. And I was like, what is going on here? These look very, very weird. I was like, what's going on here? So I had to quickly take a quick look. Now, I didn't really capture any scenes of this, and it really is hard to get a good look at what he's working on. At first, I think it's easy to confuse that these are not TIE uniforms and such. Definitely not them. Wouldn't make any sense for them to be. My strong belief is Moff Gideon is working on the Dark Trooper project. Now, you may be wondering what the Dark Troopers actually are. Well, they were a different and advanced type of battle droid, which the Imperials used in the extended universe of Star Wars, the EU, or Legends as it's come to know now. Now, Dark Troopers were basically advanced battle droids and infantry exoskeletons that featured heavy plating and resembled the arm of stormtroopers. There's very different variations of these. They come up in the Star Wars video game Dark Forces. For those who played that, it was a very fun game back in those. They also do appear in like Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds and Empire at War, and I believe they even show up in The Force Unleashed at some point, or they actually got retconned into it, but they did show up at some point. Now, while the Dark Troopers were not Force sensitive, so you can't really put the fact he's messing with midichlorians to the Dark Troopers, there was an element of the Dark Troopers which were Force sensitive. So in Star Wars Legends, the Dark Jedi of Zazam Kaf commanded several so-called quote-unquote Dark Trooper teams that had been empowered with the dark side of the Force. Now, of course, Moff Gideon does not have access to the dark side of the Force, but he does have access to the Child, which isn't really on any side of the Force right now. The Child isn't really a Jedi, so he's not on the light side, he's not really on the dark side. Most likely walking in the middle, essentially, but obviously leaning towards the light, because he's not going around trying to kill everything. Well, he is eating everything, actually. Maybe the Child is a Sith Lord. No, you get my point now. Moff Gideon is definitely up to something with these so-called Dark Troopers. And until we get more information about them, I am definitely going to be calling these people, or these things, the Dark Troopers, as it definitely looks like what he's working on. Now, obviously, these may not be Dark Troopers. We're just drawing on this from Star Wars Legends. They could be such a thing as Force Troopers in a way. That could be kind of interesting, but we don't really know what's going on here. I have to say, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau certainly know what they're doing when it comes to Mandalorian. If this is the Dark Trooper project, it is going to be extremely world building for the Mandalorian. Every single week, the world building is absolutely insane. This is fantastic. In these last 4 episodes, we've had so much world building. Now, taking a break from this a minute, I do have to quickly talk about the Mandalorian's ending episode, or ending part, where Cara Dune and Greef Karga are left on the planet. They're explaining it to the New Republic officer who comes by again, who is Captain Carson Teva, who was last seen in the previous other chapter, chapter 10, where he shoots down the Mandalorian with Dave Filoni's Trapper Wolf character. Really nice to see them back. And here he actually gives Cara Dune the symbol of the New Republic. And she takes a look at it for a minute, almost hinting that she might go and actually join the New Republic again. Because they talk about the Great Disaster, which is, of course, the destruction of Alderaan. Now, I think this is the first time I've personally heard it referred to as the Disaster, but it's basically referring to the Empire using the Death Star to destroy Alderaan. It's kind of really cool to hear it like that, and yeah, definitely given Captain Carson Teva was Alderaanian himself, or served during the Alderaan battle or campaign, which is very interesting. So whether that means he was actually at Yavin in a way. I'm not entirely sure just yet, but it could be kind of interesting. Essentially, Moff Gideon, to wrap this with you, essentially he is creating an army of super soldiers in a way. It's possible these are clones or genetically altered to be Force sensitives. Not entirely sure what's about. I definitely think they're Dark Troopers, and we'll be making an in-depth video on this sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that. It's definitely really interesting, and Moff Gideon's Imperial Remnant now seem even more scarier. In terms of his Star Destroyer, yes, he has an Archons-class command cruiser. We're not sure if this is the extent of his forces just yet, but obviously he does have quite a lot to show and display. Given that there was an Imperial base on Nevaroo, it made sense, you know, that he was basically having access to them, but he seems to have more Imperial forces out and about. Now, even a New Republic trooper, Captain Carson Tether, mentions that something is going on in the Outer Rim, and they need locals like Greef, Karga, Cara, Dune to basically explain what's going on out there. There is a hell of a lot going on inside of Mandalorian right now, and the world-building element is here. Realistically, I don't think we're going to get the conclusion to this story anytime soon. We know the Mandalorian is aiming for a Season 3 and a Season 4, with Season 3 on track to release this time next year. So I don't think the story is going anywhere. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are doing a hell of a lot of world-building when it comes to the Mandalorian. We're definitely going to see more of this as it plays out, and I don't think the conclusion to this story is just yet. And I'm all excited for that. It is going to be fantastic. So once again, wrapping up this review, this was Chapter 12, The Siege, and a massive, congratulations to Carl Weathers for making his directorial debut here on The Mandalorian. Seeing his directing abilities, creating this episode and bringing it alive was simply fantastic, and hopefully he returns to direct another episode sometime soon. Coming up on The Mandalorian next week on November 27th is Chapter 13. This is written and directed by Dave Filoni, and so far doesn't really have much information on it. Chapter 13 was at one point titled The Sorcerer, which obviously alludes to the fact this could be Ahsoka's episode, and I think given Dave Filoni is writing and directing it, this is likely Ahsoka Tano's appearance episode, so keep an eye out for that. No confirmation on it just yet though, we're just going on speculation and a previously deleted Writers Guild of America entry, so we're going to have to watch that when it comes around next week, and hopefully it'll be pretty cool to see how it goes. Okay everyone, that's it from our review here on Star Wars Night for today. Hopefully you did enjoy this. I think we've got a hell of a lot to talk about, but do let me know what you thought in this episode, particularly what Moff Gideon is up to, as that is a large discussion point for us. If you're new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from myself and the Star Wars Now team. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.